Good evening. We've got 2 games left on the slate tonight, and we're going to tear into them, all right? Myself and Terry are here for another Live Before Lock, so we appreciate you being a part of this, of course, on the Awesemo community, the Awesemo Plus Platinum community. Leave us a like, share, let everybody know. You see some stragglers coming in halfway through the show. Yo, why didn't you hit the notification bell so you could be here from the jump? Because you don't want to miss tonight. Not only does Terry McBride have everything you need to know when it comes to who to play tonight in these 2 mega playoff games, including my Philadelphia 76ers, but also we will dive deep to make sure that you are fully prepared, not just for the night in DFS, Terry, but for any cocktail party or for any chat room or for anywhere in which not trivia, but information and knowledge may come up, because I feel like people are unprepared from that. And you, my friend, are the only person on the channel that can straddle that line to let people know, no, that really was Peter Weller and RoboCop. And no, stay away from Danny Green tonight. What's up, Terry?
What's going on, my friend? That was a hell of an intro. I got a lot to live up to there, but yeah, I am just full of useless information about movies, so I'm pretty confident about that part. And hopefully we do a great job on the NBA side of things too. So yeah, a lot to break down with this one. It's an interestingly shaped slate. Should be a lot of fun. Your 76ers on the board, looking pretty strong, I gotta say. So yeah, it's going to be a fun, interesting one. Let's get into it.
Did you learn anything from the 1 3/4 games that are over? And look, to be fair, the 3/4 game that's in the 4th quarter right now has been over. But Milwaukee closes out Miami. Maybe there was some thought or hope that Miami would have some last gas left, and the Nuggets haven't even shown up yet. Maybe there's some time for them to arrive, but they're ghosts right now, shells out there. Is there anything at all that you've learned maybe today or over the weekend here, heading into the weekend, that we can apply to these 2 games?
I look, when we get into the playoffs, we see the tight rotations. We see the focus on the key players and the way that these teams really want to play basketball. And for the most part, we see the good teams win out. Like, it's not overly surprising that we're seeing the Bucks smoke the Heat. Yeah, we wanted to see it be a bit more competitive. I thought too that they would get back in it, make it a little bit interesting, but it's not a total surprise, and they're kind of on cruise control through the first round. Seeing a 30-point deficit right now in the Trailblazers Nuggets game, that's a bit of a surprise, I gotta say. But that one should be a little bit back and forth, so not a ton to take away from that. I don't think that's an accurate representation of the way those 2 teams line up, but it should be an interesting series, throughout. Just goes to show, good scoring can outrun a good team sometimes. So I think that's what we're probably seeing there with the Blazers a little bit, and the Nuggets will end up winning that one out. But it'll be a tighter, decently tight series. As far as what that means for the rest of these games tonight, I think if anything, it would probably lean me in towards the Philly side of things. Philly kind of taking care of business based on what we see with the Bucks taking care of business against the Heat. Similar kind of a alignment of teams, I think, which means good news for you.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. Anything to take the focus away here in Philadelphia from why Ben Simmons won't shoot or why only 6 points. And there's enough infighting in Philadelphia where I just need a break. So if they could go out and cover that 6.5-point spread, I would be golden tonight by all means. And then the big picture, I guess, late night, and we'll talk about this a little deeper once we get into this game and look around the slate as well. But the big picture really, I would imagine, for the late game is Donovan Mitchell and how much he's going to be out there if we can get a 30-plus minute night from Spider. But then also, what does that do to other guys, sending people to the bench and maybe taking some minutes away from Mike Conley?
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing that we see with him coming back. We saw him go for 25.7 minutes in the first game back the other night. Relegates Joe Ingles to the bench, knocks his minutes down by a few minutes per game, knocks Jordan Clarkson's minutes and upside down a little bit. So it's an interesting spot, an interesting dynamic for what it does overall for this team. And if we get him out to a full run, a 32-minute night, it really definitely has an impact on the overall upside that those guys are going to give you. We've got Mitchell projected out to 31.6 right now, and then Ingles and Clarkson both coming in at 26 minutes. We saw Clarkson got like 22, I think, the other night, and it's realistic to expect that he'd be around that. He's still a little bit pricey for the minutes that we're going to see from him, unless we get a really limited Mitchell and he gets additional run for whatever reason. I don't see it where they're going to they're going to necessarily run away with this game and blow this team out, which would lead to that situation. So I think as long as we're expecting over 30 minutes from Mitchell, I think we've got to kind of handicap our expectations for Clarkson a little bit there. And then Ingles is priced maybe a little bit closer to fair because I think out of the duo, he's going to see more minutes. And this is talking about the DraftKings pricing. They're both still relatively affordable on FanDuel. 4,900, I think Ingles is still appropriately priced on the FanDuel slate. And you get him at 55 on DK with guard and forward eligibility. So it's kind of interesting there. So it's an interesting spot to take a look at, but it's somewhat unpredictable just not knowing where Mitchell's going to come down.
Unpredictable. What a segue. Russell Westbrook. What the hell do we do, Terry? He's a game time decision. It's hard for me to think that he won't play through some pain. I mean, he would have to have that ankle completely removed, severed from his body, I think, to not be out there. But then again, that begs the question, how much is he going to be out there? Is there going to be somebody else, Neto, Ish Smith, that may get minutes, as we've seen with Chris Paul, where you can be out there as long as you want, but if you're not producing. And then also, I think from the 76ers standpoint, if they continue to put the clamps on Westbrook, that may make it even more difficult for him to overcome his struggles on top of the injury.
Yeah, and that'll be interesting if he is out there and if he's somewhat limited even, if we're talking about 80% of Russ, does that shift the focus entirely to Beal? And I know you and Adam talked about it on the show this morning, and he made some really sharp points about like, all right, Beal's going to get his, so maybe we just completely try and lock Russ down from anything that even, semi full action Russ is going to be capable of doing. That said, he's still Russ Westbrook. So he's the kind of guy who could play through that, put up a triple-double anyway on us and just put up a monster fantasy score anyway, just through sheer force of will. He's appropriately priced for being regular Russ Westbrook, and we've got him projected out to 39 minutes right now. So assuming that he goes, I think we have to kind of assume that we're going to get what we can project for. If we wanted to shave, I wouldn't shave rates necessarily. I might just cut minutes. So if I was uncomfortable with the idea that he would play that well or get that many minutes, I might say, all right, let me cut the minutes projection back to 34, 32. Once you get beyond that, it's just not realistic for him to produce upside. So I don't think he's going to be below that because he's not going to be giving the team enough if he's playing less than that. So realistically, they're going to need him out there for the full run. So if he goes, I expect we're going to get around, the 36 to 38 to 40 minutes that we've got him projected for, which puts him around the regular fantasy production we've come to expect, 1.48 minutes points per minute for the season. That was bouncing around to gigantic numbers toward the end of the season, but then we've seen it cool a little bit as well while he still remained high priced. We know what Bradley Beal's capable of running alongside him. If he doesn't play or if he's limited, Beal goes up, the assists go up, just a lot of the general production. We've already got him projected for 41 minutes. I think he's kind of just a fire on all cylinders kind of play. And then, we'll get a little bit extra Ish Smith. We'll probably get a little bit extra Hal Neto if Russ Westbrook is limited. If he doesn't go, those guys become strong values because they're both pretty low priced and they're both going to see a significant uptick in minutes usage expectation.
11-2 as far as the price on DraftKings. And look, the upside is always going to be worth it. And you even said it when you were first answering the question. It's Russell Westbrook. So I get it. But the Sixers, we can't deny the defense that they've been able to play specifically on Westbrook, whatever injury can be hanging. So normally, especially in a 2-game slate, I'm going to guess that the price is not an issue. But in this particular case, with some extra variables on top of the game tonight, Terry, I do wonder if 11-2, where you may be able to get to a Beal, Simmons, and even Mitchell in a lineup, at the same lineup, I just wonder if 11-2 in this particular case may be too much of a risk.
So it's an interesting play, and what I did as we've been talking is I did what I've kind of done last weekend, which is to dash off 500 lineups in Fantasy Cruncher, just using the optimal lineups, no random, no anything, no forced changes. So this is the first 500 off the top on DraftKings. It came up with 4% Russell Westbrook. That's 18 out of 500 lineups at any position. Across sites, it's totally different. On FanDuel 500 lineups, it came up 73% Russ Westbrook, 366 out of 500 lineups. He's 11,000 over there, but we've got to play 2 point guards. The positioning just kind of helps us not necessarily need Russ. And that's before we give him any kind of haircut for any injuries or anything like that. That's just with his regular projection from Alex, which is for a 39-ish minute night, 56 DraftKings points. So yeah, he's somewhat price prohibitive given that everybody else on this slate is under 10K. Everybody else on this slate is coming up somewhat more optimal. So it's really interesting the way that's coming along. If people are just going by how things come along in crunches, that could be something of an anti-optimizer play. But I think it's Russ Westbrook, so there's going to be an equal number of people out there who are just smashing the Russ Westbrook button when they're hand building, 5 to 10 lineups, as opposed to people building 150 or even 50 or 20 with an optimizer. So it's probably going to come out in the wash anyway. But it's really interesting how he comes up in terms of how frequently we're finding him in these, the first 500 optimal lineups.
I wonder what happens when you use Beal in that same scenario, because clearly under 10K, normally you're going to glance at that and salivate. But again, in this slate, the 2 games tonight, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that he's the best play on the slate, and it may not be close, knowing that you can get Ja and Mitchell less, and even Ben Simmons, who I absolutely love tonight at 7,600. That may be the best price point, at least for an expected return. But we know that no matter what the Sixers throw at Washington, they can't stop Bradley Beal.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that Adam put it on the show was totally apt this morning, was just Bradley Beal's going to get his. And it's basically regardless of what they do here. So he's just a dynamite scorer, was one of the league leading scorers this season, and just, an absolutely phenomenal offensive basketball player. What the Wizards are going to do the other direction to stop the Sixers from doing whatever they want, and I mean that about most of the Sixers, not just one guy, is a totally different question. Whether Ben Simmons wants to shoot or not, he's going to be producing between the assists and the rebounds. Like, if you guys don't want him down there, I'll take him as my point guard on the New York Knicks. I'll tell you that right now. I don't care how much he scores if he's going to be doing everything that he does. He'd be a nice fit up here. So just keep that.
You can't have him, Terry. I don't even want you to put that thought out. No,
that thought's in the universe now. That's it. So yeah, in that same set of crunches across 500 lineups on DK, Simmons came up 80%. So he was coming up definitely by far more at that point guard spot. And then to continue the point and answer the question, Bradley Beal was the number 1 highest owned shooting guard, twice as much almost as anybody else, coming up 74% of the time on that DK crunch across 500 lineups. On the FanDuel side of things, Beal was second to Seth Curry, believe it or not, who's in here. They both came up just under 50% of the time. And then with what Russ Westbrook gaining all that point guard ownership, Simmons actually slips. So it's very different across sites in terms of how they come up when you're just running off the optimals off the top.
Wow, Seth Curry comes up more than Tobias Harris. Is that right?
No, probably not, because I think I assume Harris is a power forward on the FanDuel slate, so he's coming up 81%.
Okay, so you're just looking at the position slate. I'm sorry.
That was just positionally, yeah. So just a shooting guard. So yeah, Harris was 81% of the time. I believe the highest owned Sixer overall on the slate on FanDuel. Yep,
makes sense. All right, so let's look at Russ from the different standpoint, and clearly Donovan Mitchell came up at the start trying to maneuver through minutes. We have Ja Morant on there as well. And look, if it is, you wanted to take somebody like Ben Simmons at 7,600, I'm going to guess, because of the unknown with Donovan Mitchell and maybe this belief, and it's out there, speaking of putting it out there in the universe, there is this narrative tonight that all of a sudden Ja Morant is going to be slowed down significantly by Utah. Here's what I know of all three, is that Ben Simmons is going to have an amazing opportunity tonight to put up a triple-double and probably 15 to 16 assists and 12 to 13 rebounds. At 7,600, I am selfishly going to pivot to Ben Simmons, but you're unbiased in this. Who is the best pivot at the point guard position instead of Westbrook?
Boy. It's very much Ben Simmons based on the way that this crunch came out. And then I think Mike Conley's right there. I think you can make some good stories around the idea of rostering George Hill for kind of cheap. Neto's in play as a value play if we're expecting a little bit of extended minutes, and that's kind of the narrative that we're chasing there if we're looking for pivots off of Russ Westbrook, is both between the price and the expectation that maybe he doesn't get his full run. That'd kind of lead us a little bit naturally into those George Hill shares. So, into those Neto shares. So I wouldn't love the idea of playing like Simmons and Hill together, Westbrook and Neto together. But if you're making a decision to go away from one of those guys, I think like a Hill-Conley combination is kind of interesting. You're not spending a lot of money there, so it lets you access all kinds of other things in these different constructions. There are a fair amount of lineups that are coming up with a bunch of Sixers in them. So it is coming up with a decent mix of like Simmons, Seth Curry, and then George Hill in some of these. So I'd be careful with just how they're coming together. Danny Green being in that group as well. I wouldn't want to get overwhelmed in some of these lineups with Sixers. So I'd just say watch how much they're coming up. Make sure you're covering a wider range of outcomes than having just all the Sixers make value. There is a good narrative for most of these guys getting there, but to get all of them at the same time, to get 5 of them is maybe going to be a little bit tricky. So I'd just keep an eye on that. I would, not necessarily cap it, but I just keep an eye on like which ones I'm playing together and how those minutes go together.
Fair enough. Are you good? Speaking of Ja, are you getting to Ja Morant tonight? You expect a lot of exposure in the lineups for him. I don't even know if you've ran it as far as the optimizer is concerned, but just looking at the price point, 8,300 on DraftKings, similar right there to Donovan Mitchell. So clearly you can flex Mitchell to the 2, but also just looking at Morant kind of as the confidence that you have tonight with him, Terry.
Yeah, I think especially in terms of just, raw point scoring, he's going to need to do a lot out there, right? So he's seeing 33% usage in the playoffs right now, averaging 36.5 points, nearly 40 minutes over the first couple of games. So he's very much in play. We do need raw point scoring and raw point totals and raw fantasy points in this kind of a 2-game slate. I think he definitely mixes in terms of how frequently he came up optimal. He's another guy that kind of is very different across sites. 38% of those 500 lineups on the FanDuel slate that I just ran off here, and only 7% on the DK slate. So again, if you're thinking in terms of the way that optimizers are building lineups for people, maybe it makes a little sense to, change things up and chase him a little bit there to get some of those raw points in. There are going to be several fairly equivalent plays at that point guard spot at that price. And I think he's right there in the mix with the other ones. He's getting ownership. It's not like he's sneaky or secret, but he's getting a little bit less than some of the other guys. So I think he does make sense to consider as a potential pivot, a potential pay down from some of the top end options that we've discussed.
Is there really, again, we're dealing with the short slate, so it's not easy to just go around the league here and point to 2 or 3 guys that may not be as obvious. Everybody's looking at the 48 to 3K in between guys. So just looking, because we're here in the backcourt, looking even at the guard position across the board, you start to get below Dillon Brooks, Joe Ingles, and then it gets to what we're talking about, Ish Smith, where it's really heavy contingent on somebody in front of them not playing. You get down to Neto, same scenario, Tyrese Maxey as well. I don't know if you can even look, honestly, Terry, in confidence at maybe 1 or 2 guys in that 42K or 4,200, pardon me, and lower range in DK, and kind of in that similar area of what you would be getting for talent in FanDuel as well.
So, I mean, it depends on the contests that you're entering. It depends on your risk tolerance within those contests, how many lineups you're building. There's a lot that goes into that question in terms of how much risk we want to take on with some of these guys. For GPP plays, a lot of the time, we're going to need to live in that space and take on some of that risk, take on some of those. Okay, if X happens, Y is the result. So we need to play Y hoping for X because the entire field is playing X, right? So we've got to differentiate a little bit. So we're trying to capture some of that upside. And guys like Clarkson, like I said before, he is still priced up. He's overpriced for the slate, for the opportunity. But that's also a situation where it's keeping his ownership pretty low. So that's the kind of situation where you want to maybe take advantage, pay up a little bit. We're going to have some money to spend, I think, between the propensity for getting to some mid-range plays on this slate in just in general, and then having some viable value. I think it maybe makes sense to pay up to be a little bit different with a guy like that who he's very scoring dependent, but he is a very good scorer. So on a night where he goes off, if under 10% of the field's going to be on him on a 2-game slate, I want to capture some of that possibility of him just lighting it up, even if he only sees the 24 to 26 minute night that we're expecting. If he goes off for 20 some odd real life points and and then just a handful of counting stats, a steal, something like that, he's gonna pay off that price and be pretty key to this slate. So guys like that are who I'm looking for. Joe Ingles kind of fits into that same narrative, and then getting to some of the other low owned guys, be it like a Davis Bertans, thinking about. I'm just looking through the board here for anybody who's getting minutes.
But Bertans can only get better from what he had last game, right?
Well, that's also true.
DraftKings is going to start giving you points for fouling out. I don't think so.
Right. Right. So yeah, I mean, and that's the kind of dice roll that we're taking here, you know. But and there's a reason that these guys are priced down the way they are. So I think for GPP play, we do need to capture some of that. So like looking on the Memphis side at like Grayson Allen, Desmond Bain, these guys you don't really want to play comfortably. And then on the Washington side, the Ish Smith or Hal Neto of the world, if you don't get news of them getting increased minutes, well, then they're going to slot into that range where, all right, they're more of a dart throw, they're more of a gamble. I'm taking on more risk by playing them, but the opportunity is still there and the field is not in that case. So those are the spots I'm looking for as I'm making, you know, if I'm making 150 of these. If I'm making one, it's a lot harder to get to those decisions, but at the same time, you do want to think about at least getting a little bit further afield than everybody who's just making one, because everybody who's just making one is going to be focused on some of the top end plays. Everybody wants to get, you know, Simmons, Bradley Beal, Joel Embiid, Tobias, and these guys into your lineup. So you've got to be thinking and taking a bit of a different approach there.
And speaking of which, I'll just add this in because I saw just in time on the hashtag, unlock Tyrese Maxey. Philly don't like Shake Milton. It's not our fault. Don't blame us. Blame Shake. He has completely fallen out of rotation, a favor in that rotation. So a guy like Tyrese Maxey, there are two, and I'll give Adam credit because he nailed George Hill earlier, but I think these two guys in Maxey and Hill are dependent on two different game flows, if that makes sense, Terry, where if this is a blowout or a comfortable lead, 12 to 14 point lead, you're going to see a lot more Maxey. That's where Doc is comfortable, kind of giving some guys a break, knowing that this rookie can step up. If it's tight and you see Philly maybe down in the second half, I think you are going to see a lot more George Hill go to the veteran off the bench. So it's kind of the differential, right, between the two game flows, but either one of those guys could work on the back end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the more likely scenario, you know, a bit of a competitive game playing in Washington that we'll see more George Hill. It could be closer than what we've got broken down on the board overall right now. Maxey only pulling like 3.5 minutes in the projections that I've got up. But I think there's a narrative certainly where we could see him for more time and see him for more time than Shake Milton, even in a competitive game. It just seems like, yeah, like you said, that's kind of the favor of the day and the way that they're going with this spot. So I agree with you totally that if it is a blowout and if they're well ahead in the fourth quarter and Ben Simmons doesn't need to play, then we're going to see a lot of Tyrese Maxey, because why burn out George Hill in that situation when you're comfortably ahead, comfortably holding the series lead and presumably moving on? That's the spot where you want to rest up at George Hill. So absolutely makes a ton of sense that would be the situation where you see him. But for right now, Hill's coming up a significant amount more just for the fact that he's 3,800 on FanDuel, 3,300 on DK with multi-position on DK. Even at only 18 minutes, that has a lot of utility. That is a spot you can move around for a lot of upside.
I just need a cameo, right? Like Kareem and Airplane or something like that. I just need a quick little, hey, I'm here, get you a couple of points here off minimal minutes for either one of these guys, and it's a memorable oh yeah, remember Kareem and Airplane, right? That's all I need for tonight.
Yeah, and you know what? If these guys get out on the court, they won't have to be dragging Lambeer up and down for 4 quarters like Kareem did. So,
who's the best athlete cameo of all time?
Ooh, wow! I mean, that would have been way high up on my list. I tell you, OJ Simpson is off the board for multiple reasons, but I also think the roles were mostly too big. Like Nordberg in Police Academy was too big. What about Dan Marino in Ace Ventura?
Yeah, I'll give you that.
Not too big a role. He was decent.
It has to be cameo. You're right. OJ was a character in the Naked
co-star.
Gun. No,
or like a
exactly.
Role. So yeah,
I'll give you two.
Marino.
I think Marino is great, especially because that gum line still sticks with me. I don't know why.
Yeah, exactly. They gave him a good line in it, so that kind of like
they did. All right, I'll give you one. We'll sprinkle some more here as I watch the wheels work there on Terry's head. I'm sure he's got every single movie we reference sitting behind him, even in the tight shot.
Absolutely.
But Lee Trevino, Happy Gilmore.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Pops up like
Never
4 times through the movie. Yeah, so good.
Yeah,
so
absolutely
good.
Right. No NBA though. I mean, that's what we'd have to think. I'm sure. Like, look, does LeBron count, by the way, in Trainwreck, or is he in it too much? I didn't see that movie.
I wouldn't say he's in it too much. So yeah, I would count that. He's only in, if I remember it correctly, I think 2 scenes. So I'd call that a glorified cameo at worst. So I would count that. And then Like if I'm thinking
You can't
about
count Chuck Norris in dodgeball. I saw that on the stream. Chuck Norris isn't an athlete. He's just a martial artist. I know that he's athletic and could kick my ass, but we're talking about somebody that played a professional sport. That's all.
Yeah,
like give me Henri and something over Chuck Norris.
Well, and if you want to go dodgeball, isn't Lance Armstrong in a cameo at the end of dodgeball? Doesn't he meet him at the airport and he sends him back? That's what motivates him.
Yes.
Meeting Lance Armstrong, which that scene didn't age too well if you're thinking back over time from what Lance Armstrong represented as the motivational factor there. Maybe not so much anymore.
Fair enough. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of stuff with guys that have come out and it's been, doing people dirty, where all of a sudden you look back and say, oh yeah, I remember that guy was, I don't know, Home Alone 2 or something like that. You never know here. All right, so let's look here. And look, we have everything available to you on the Awesemo Plus platform. The big board is the premium tool today for you. We only have a couple more hours, or really a half hour before the slate's locked to use it and take advantage of it. But everything from Awesemo Plus at $29.95, it really is an amazing deal to get all we have. Now, we do streamline it for the Awesemo Plus NBA Weekly package. That's $16.95, and then the $4.95 NBA Weekly Express package. But you should have everything across the board, $29.95. Again, today, the free premium tools, the MLB ownership rankings, the NBA Big Board, the NHL main slate, top slack. So there's a lot that you can take full advantage of. And we just remind you, it's beyond just liking and sharing and subscribing and making sure you're here on time for Live Before Locks with the notification bell. We want you to use these tools alongside. And then look, every now and again, we'll take a break and we'll talk about the best cameo by an athlete of all time to give you a chance to go to a different tab. Hold on. They're going back to the boom bust. Whatever it may be, we're here for you. Awesemo Plus, $29.95. And man, I just looked up too. I have two more that I wonder if you're going to get to. I don't know if it's just movies. All right. So no TV shows, because that's too much of a gray, right? It's too much of a line to blur here. Can't do like Shaq and Curb or Ken Griffey Jr. and the Fresh Prince. It has to be movies. Is that fair?
Yeah. And that's a much broader canvas to be looking at too. With if you're,
we'll be here for 2 hours, brother. We do that.
Easier,
Trust me. Reggie Jackson in the Naked Gun. If that's where you're going to go with Naked Gun, how about that?
Well
Mr.
done.
Papa Giorgio 10 with a hell of a shot. Now the premium Slack is up and running. Yes, premium Slack is up and running here. So make sure you have a question. You can tag Terry as well. We'll get to that. The super chat on the stream. Anything that you have tonight specifically for Terry, more so. Look, I'll do my best with the Sixers. So Dr. Chad, thoughts on Neto Royce versus Ish Bertans. Studs did good now. Got to predict crappy value. That's Dr. Chad on there on the premium Slack for you, Terry.
That was Neto and Royce O'Neal versus
yes, Ish and Bertans. Ish and the walking, living human foul.
Jeez.
He's the new Scott Williams. Except he can shoot. I'm sorry.
No, please keep going. Honestly, I'm stalling the time here too. I'm trying to figure out which side of that I prefer. I think I prefer the O'Neal side just because we're probably going to get 10, 12 more minutes out of O'Neal than we're going to get out of Bertans. And if we're considering Neto and Ish about even in terms of minutes, in terms of potential production, I think I would just grab the additional minutes with O'Neal. I think that's the play.
Yeah, I don't know how you get. See, the thing is I just don't know what to trust with Washington outside of those top two guys. I don't know what you're going to get from Hachimura. I don't know what you're going to get. Bertans, I mean, people are already saying, that's where fantasy lineups, I forget who it was, but that's where fantasy lineups go to die, right? We've seen this. So stay the hell away. But just in general, I mean, who is and I'll appeal to you here with the term, who is the third person? Who is the supporting actor? Who's the Bob Hoskins of the Washington Wizards tonight?
I mean, if you wanted to go to somebody who's like, in terms of fantasy points per minute, I'd love to be able to tell you that Daniel Gafford would be on the board because he's produced 1.22 fantasy points per minute across the course of the season. We've got him projected for 19 minutes, and he costs 5,300 on FanDuel, 42 on DK, where he's a center, which puts him at odds with some of the other guys we want to play. It's difficult to get to him. I think he's justifiable from those terms. And if he stumbles into 6-7 additional minutes, he could have nice upside at that per minute price. I don't trust Davis Bertans. I'd like to be able to trust Rui. He's given me more nice games than Bertans does when I've rostered them. But I don't really. Overall, 0.76 fantasy points per minute across the course of the season. Bertans at 0.71. Just not overly reliable guys. Either one could make it and could deliver nice value on this slate. Rui probably has the better path just based on more clear minutes, more likely minutes, but the production is not great from either one of them. I would definitely be mixing and matching some of them across different lineups. It looks like Rui's pulling down a really significant ownership number on FanDuel. So if I was looking to maybe get away from somebody based on just the field is heavy and I'm not overly confident in the guy, that's one where I would maybe start looking around for different plays at the small forward on FanDuel and not get away from him completely because he does come up wait a minute. Oh, I'm on the DK. I was like, wait a minute. Yeah, he does come up 73% of the time if we're just dashing off the top of the optimals. But Danny Green comes up a lot more optimal. And then that backfills with the other percentage with some Kyle Anderson, some Bojan Bogdanovic, and some Thibault, all of whom are reasonable plays and guys that we can reasonably expect to produce here. So I think you do have some options there where we don't need to go crazy over the top for Rui Hachimura, where he's coming down nearly like 50% owned. I think that's a spot where I'd maybe look to get a little different than the field.
All right, so looking at it from a DK standpoint here, Terry, because of the roster availability you have with Beal to be a 2 or a 3, also with Harris to be a 3 or a 4, just looking at the small forward position as far as the top play, let's just assume Bradley Beal has already been rostered as a 2, or maybe somebody for whatever reason is fading Beal, which I can't imagine would be a good play, but Tobias Harris at the 3 and even into the 4 now. How do you look at him? I mean, the price is there at 7,100. Clearly, Doc Rivers wants him as a key cog in this offense. Even if he's struggling, they won't move away from him. So I'm just looking at the price point alone, and I'm thinking, yeah, you could pivot to Brooks. As you mentioned, Bogdanovic, maybe even a lesser in Anderson. Ingles is going to be relegated now to the bench more, although he'll get minutes. It looks like Harris, because at 7,100, at least on DK, might be the best play at the 3 or 4.
Yeah, between the two positions in that DK crunch where we're just dashing off the optimals, Tobias is the leading player overall, and it's a pretty wide margin, given that he's coming up in 99% of these. 497 out of our top 500 lineups off the top here come up with Tobias in them at either the 3 or the 4. So extremely, extremely strong play. You don't necessarily need to go that crazy with him if you're building 150. He doesn't have to be in like 149 of them, but he's the most likely guy to deliver value on what you've mentioned is a very nice price at 7,100, given his utility, given the expectation for full minutes, and the idea, like you said, that Doc's going to just keep him out there, run him as much as possible, and rely on him. He's a veteran guy. He's a key to what this team does when they're playing well. 1.12 fantasy points per minute across the course of the season. He's cheap for that kind of a production. So he's coming up a ton. I think if I was to pick anybody where I had to say he's a lock play, I'll take 100% of them, it would probably be Tobias on this slate.
Philly Mamba coming in on the super chat here. And again, get these likes up. You want to make sure if you're not already subscribed to subscribe. You can share and tell the entire world about what we're doing here. Since you're here and enjoying it, everybody else should be as well. And then beyond that, that's the fire alarm. That'll go off. No, I think that's me. And beyond that, so let's look at this. Philly Mamba, Spider, Jackson, Harris, Beal or O'Neal, Harris. I'm going to mute so you can answer that question. Oh, look, it's off. See?
Yeah.
Tyler, that's my fault. If we get the email, I'll fall on the sword. That's me. I want the chat to know that wasn't Tyler. No technical difficulties here. Nobody should be blaming him for anything. That was, God knows what the hell's going on, but it's over at least.
I was waiting for like an old person to walk by behind you with like a hearing aid that was malfunctioning and beeping or something like that. So what were my choices in that either or?
All right, let's reset here. Philly Mamba weighs in on the super chat. Spider, Jackson, Harris, or Beal, O'Neal, Harris?
Probably Beal side of that one, I think. The Beal O'Neal side, take some secure minutes, guys who are going to be on the court producing and just kind of in their exactly reliable spots. I think I like that side of it a little bit better.
Fair enough. And just as a quick update here, we did get word Russell Westbrook is good to go. So he's in. Right. And it makes sense. And look, we kind of talked about it, but there was still this sense of hypothetical. How do you just kind of take us back to where we began? We don't have to go through the full 15 like the other show by any means, but I'm just curious, now that we know he's in, how are you, is this change anything? Are you locking him in maybe even more? Was there some concern about, well, even the game time decision might be a deterrent? Just to kind of update and revisit where we were from a hypothetical to now that he's locked in officially.
Yeah, so now that he's locked in officially, we already saw on DK where he wasn't coming up a ton in those optimal lineups. So now I'm curious to see what the public ownership does in the next update. We were getting him well under 50% of the probable lineups for the public. I was intrigued by him at that level because I think he was going to come up a decent enough amount of the time as just a raw point scorer as one of the top guys on the board. So if the public was trailing the play, even if we weren't getting the highest optimal lineup rate, even if he wasn't coming off the top in optimizers, it was starting to be intriguing as a play, pay up to be different, pay up to be contrarian kind of a play. Even with 30-something%, you can do that here. Now, if he pushes back up toward 50%, I may be less inclined to pay up because you're not getting that different anymore because a lot of people are doing it. So now maybe it's a spot where I'm looking to see, all right, what if I dip into this mid-range? Maybe I'm paying for Embiid and Simmons, taking Bradley Beal, and then getting into some of these mid-range guys that we've got available, and taking Tobias Harris in that, of course, as well. Maybe I do play 3 Sixers. Maybe I grab Beal and then start looking into the other game for some, of the more expensive guys that I wasn't previously able to access in Westbrook constructions. That said, he does have his usual Russ Westbrook appeal if we're expecting 39 minutes. Like I said, very good opportunity for him to just be a runaway and hide raw point total. Maybe shaves a tiny fraction of upside off of Bradley Beal in terms of we're not getting any additional expectation now from Beal. I don't think it's going to really change the Beal play in any real notable way, but just something to consider. We're not getting that uptick in assists that we might have gotten if Westbrook was limited. As far as Ish and Neto go, I think it just relegates them to their mid-20s, low 20s kind of a roll off the bench.
Now, I know that this is all about getting people ready for lineups that are going to lock in 22 minutes, but I did see this on the stream, Terry. Fortune Fantasy debating cashing out the parlay or letting it ride on the Wizards' money line. I would just strongly suggest you cash that out. Wizards may cover this spread tonight, which is very likely at home against the Sixers team that likes to play down a lot. But they ain't winning this basketball game with a hobbled Russell Westbrook and nobody other than Bradley Beal out. Unless Bradley's going to drop 90 tonight, which could happen, I don't see it happening. That's just me.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. You're the sports betting guru more than I am, but that's an easy one. Even an ignoramus like me can tell you that one is one you want to cash out of now.
Well, I wouldn't say guru if anybody's heard the last couple of picks that I've given out on the tip-off, but that's fine. I just wanted to preempt that in case there was somebody hanging around here. Now, we haven't really talked about the center position, and I know that we have to get back to, speaking of which, maybe one of the best cameos by an athlete all time, by, of course, a center, but there are better ones out there, including one that was mentioned on the stream. But Joel Embiid is clearly the obvious play here, 9,800 on DraftKings. You can get to somebody else. It's Valanciunas. You can get to Rudy Gobert clearly on a DraftKings lineup. But as far as the pivot is concerned on a FanDuel lineup, do you have to? Look, Rudy Gobert probably jumps out as the best play from a value standpoint. But do you have to pivot with Embiid tonight? Or can you work Embiid in the majority of your lineups knowing that Washington's really got nothing for him?
Yeah, I think he makes a ton of sense. He's another guy where we're just looking to roster some obvious points here. And Joel Embiid is probably the most obvious source of points on this entire slate, the guy who's just most likely to shoot for upside. He's not going to be interrupted by anybody. It's not a situation where like Westbrook and Beal are going to be doing some of the similar things on the court. Joel Embiid kind of stands alone in that offense in terms of what he does. So I do like his upside here. That said, across those crunches using the optimals, came up about half the time on the FanDuel slate, 53%, with the other shares getting split almost evenly between Joel and Rudy Gobert, which makes a lot of sense for this slate. We did get 1%, so 6 lineups with Alex Len, 3 lineups with Dwight Howard, and 3 lineups with Derek Favors in that spot. I would question whether those would be tournament viable on the FanDuel slate. On the other slate, since you can move pieces around a little bit more, Embiid came up 30%, 32 to be totally accurate, and Rudy Gobert came up more of the time, just because of how things come together over there with being able to get to some of these moving parts in different ways. It made sense, I think, for the optimizer in terms of paying 77 for Rudy Gobert instead of paying the full freight at 98 for Joel Embiid. That's a big difference, and it's not quite the equivalent of the difference in what we expect from them in terms of their overall projection, in terms of their probability of hitting an upside tonight. So it comes together, yet another position that comes together in different ways across sites. These are two very, very different slates from site to site.
Philly Mamba again on the super chat. Spider and Simmons or Beal and Conley? This on FanDuel for you, Terry.
I might take the Spider and Simmons side on the FanDuel slate. I kind of like that. I think that was coming up more optimal. Simmons was that was the site I said Simmons was. Nope, excuse me. That was the site where Simmons was coming up less.
Really?
Yes, Simmons was like coming up 18 on FanDuel. I'm just jumping
because you can't maneuver him around
here. Right, because you're kind of restricted, and that's where we were getting to a ton of Russ. Cost a little bit less, so it was Russ and Ja were the top pairing at point guard on FanDuel. But that, again, this is restricted to 500 lineups coming off the top, which is using the optimals. Once we stick some randomness in there, we're getting a lot of different lineups. So it's totally viable to go to that Simmons construction. My first inclination was good to go that way, so I'll stick with that as my answer.
Cream on the Slack, and then we have to tell you about this really cool way in which you can continue to win money, because that's all we have for you are really cool ways that you could win money. But before we do that, Cream wants to know, and this is, again, a deeper play here tonight, if you expect Desmond Bane to get at least 15 minutes, even if it's not in a blowout.
Yeah, we've got him projected at 22 right now, so I would have to trust that Alex knows what he's talking about there. He's usually pretty damn good at these minutes projections. So I think it's a clear path there for him to see time, and they've been like that through the season in terms of the way that they give minutes out. So far in the playoffs, he's averaging 21 minutes across the first two games. So I totally see that. I think there's a reasonable expectation for him to get 15 minutes at least.
Let's look at this. PrizePicks is sponsoring our show, and it's awesome because you can say goodbye to the Sharks, the lineup optimizers, the mass multi-entries, and you pick 2, 3, 4, or 5 players available on the board. And if you correctly select a 5-player lineup, it can net you up to 10 times your entry fee. NFL, NBA, esports, we have everything here. PrizePicks has it. And just put all of your picks, combining them across all sports. It's available, similar to as you think of parlay. So you download this app, the App Store, the Google Play Store, wherever you have it, whatever phone you use. You can make your first deposit. And of course, this is what we do. We match whenever you do that. First deposit up to $100. Just use our promo code Awesemo. Notice the theme, it's pretty much across the board. Awesemo is the promo code to use for everything, including PrizePicks. And we were looking at this earlier on the day, so it may have moved just a little bit, but looking at Odds Shopper, at least, the strongest 2 plays on the board tonight still are under 18.5 for Bogdanovich and under 24.5 for Ja Morant. These are both points plays. I don't want to go deep in assists or PRA yet. Just keep it simple with points. Do you like under for both of those?
Give them to me one more time. Sorry.
Sure. Bogdanovich is 18.5, and we have on Odds Shopper a 74% chance, a probability of that bet hitting. And then Ja Morant just a little under that at 68% chance hitting under 24.5. And that's where I was speaking earlier, pardon me, Terry, about that falls into the narrative. The books at least believe that Ja's not going to cook tonight for 30, 35 points.
I think I do agree with the Bogdanovich side of it. I think that's going to come up as an under. And just looking at our projections for one of the other sites that we project out, it looks like those agree with that idea. I'd be a little bit more skeptical on the Ja one. Maybe it's a little personal bias coming in there. Maybe it's a little bit of just, hey, playoffs. He's gonna have to score a lot of points for this team to do anything tonight. So I think if I was throwing money on it, maybe it's probably a bad taking the numbers out a little bit for me, but a little personal bias on that one. I might take the over on that one.
Did you ever see that comedy in 2003, Stuck on You, with Matt Damon and Greg Kinnear?
Farley Brothers movie where they're Siamese twins, or excuse me, conjoined twins.
So there are not, it's not one, but there are two NFL players. One is a former, the other is still current. You know the obvious one. You remember the obvious one, right?
I got to say, I don't remember the movie.
Tom Brady.
Oh, yeah, right. He was in there.
Look, yep. Terry, I don't think anybody's going to fault you for not being able to go deep dive into Stuck on You by any means. Lawyer Malloy was also in that as well.
Brothers movies I would have had too. That's I would have had a better working knowledge of that one. I think I've only seen maybe 2 or 3 times, which is weird. Feels like most people are like, bad movies I only watch once. What's wrong with you? But at 3 o'clock in the morning when something's just on, the remote's over there, it just stays on.
You know, that's not a bad thing, though. See, I think it's all relative, right? Like if I see So I Married an Axe Murderer and it's 2:30 in the morning, I'm going to watch that. But you know what? If it's 9:30 at night, I'll probably watch it as well. I'm sure a lot of people right now, if they even remember that movie, are thinking, oh, that's a piece of shit. Come on, what are you doing? You've got sports on. But it's all relative to our own, right?
Oh my God. And come on, anybody out there who was just thinking that needs to give that movie another chance. That movie's hilarious. That's such a fun movie.
My God. Yes, exactly right.
This is the artificial horizon. Stephen Wright as the pilot. This is the artificial horizon, which is way better than the actual horizon.
Yes. Anthony LaPaglia, by the way, steals that movie.
Yeah, he's so good.
And it's a great movie with a lot of powerful people on that. I didn't realize this real quick because I did see a captain question I wanted to get back to here as we are still getting you ready for these 2 gigantic games. But I didn't realize that Hines Ward was in The Dark Knight Rises. And he may get juice for this. Yeah. Look, I don't remember how good he was in that, if at all, but he was carrying the ball when that explosion hits on the field,
collapses,
right?
Yeah, field collapses behind him. So, I mean, to answer your question, he was spectacularly good. He ran back a touchdown on the opening kickoff with the field collapsing into the void behind him and everybody dying. So that's probably the peak play that you can make in the NFL, I think, in terms of running back at kickoff. So he was great. That's a good one.
Here's what we
had. Before we move on, I'm going to throw 2 at you from the same flick, and there's a bunch of other cameos in this one, but an Albert Brooks movie, an excellent Albert Brooks movie, baseball movie, since I'm crunching baseball lineups, The Scout with Albert Brooks. We get Brett Saberhagen and Keith Hernandez taking on Steve Nebraska in his professional tryout. So that was a good one.
Wow.
That I like. Movie near and dear.
That's Brendan Fraser, right?
It is. Yep. He finds Brendan Fraser playing in the Mexican League and brings him to New York, and hilarity ensues.
Yeah, and look, 720 Red Dog makes the point about nobody cared about Hines Ward in that movie. Cool scene, but not memorable. I get it, but I think look, it's one thing to be Brett Favre in some stupid, Ben Stiller movie, which is really funny, don't get me wrong, but this dude was in Batman. That's all. That's all I'm saying. All right, now.
Yeah, and that's one that's not like expected too, That's an oddball.
Correct. That's it. A lot of love for Gafford on the stream tonight, and I'm wondering if you have much exposure to him in your lineups, especially with this shorter slate, if you think that you can maneuver and get to Gafford. A lot of people giving him love on the stream. Pardon me.
Yeah, like I said, he's interesting from a points per minute perspective. It looks like on the DK slate, he was coming up 17% of the lineups, so not a definite non-zero there. And that's probably a level to which he'd mix into at least some of my lineups. If I was pulling 150 out of this 500, I would have a reasonable share of them. And it's a spot where if I'm making that play, I'd probably get aggressive about making it across 150 lineups. So if that's one of my go-tos where I'm saying, all right, points per minute, I'm making that gamble, I'm taking on the risk that he doesn't play extended minutes, he doesn't get the additional minutes that we need for that play to pay off. But if he does, and there's not a lot of people there, I still want to be up and above the field on the play if it does come through, because that's where we're really gaining our advantage and elevating a lot of our lineups. So I think if I was making the play, I would look to strongly exceed the field on it. We get him with numbers that are difficult to make that happen in terms of his public ownership exposure right now. You get into an uncomfortable situation where you're taking on, we've got him projected under 20 minutes, and you need to take on, to make that really viable, maybe 35-ish% ownership on him. So you're taking a big gamble with a chunk of your lineups. To get him around or below the field at that like 15 to 20%, you're not gaining a ton for having made the play and for getting all of that risk into your lineups. So it's a tough spot. I think I would push above the field if I was doing it, though, and it is one of the better points per dollar value guys on the board.
Soul Dope 1234 on the super chat. We have a couple of premium Slack questions to get to as well here before we get out of here. And all lineups lock at 9 minutes. And also in that time, we're going to charge Terry with finding a better cameo by an athlete than Mike Tyson in The Hangover, because that is going to be the go-to for everybody when there's, especially the younger people, right, who don't even remember what Kareem Abdul-Jabbar looks like. Soul Dope 1234 on FanDuel, Terry. Ish/Mitchell versus Conley or Curry and Curry.
Ish and Mitchell versus Conley and Curry.
On FanDuel, correct.
Yeah, I think Curry was coming up a decent amount for me, and it's another situation where I'm just going to kind of defer to the minutes. We've got Curry projected right around 30 minutes, and I think that's realistic, if not potentially a little bit low. If they're lighting him up, he might see a few additional minutes late where they're resting some other guys. I think they'd be comfortable just leaving him to soak some of that up, where we're not projecting Ish to get near that much. And it's a situation where there are other guys who could take those minutes. Westbrook could be required to play a lot and just, kind of limit the upside for him. So I think I would take the Curry side of that one.
All right, couple on the premium Slack, and it's surrounding this game here. Let's look at Swanson 79 first. Could Matthews and Scott get any minutes if this Washington-Philadelphia game blows out? And I imagine, is he talking about Mike Scott? Because my goodness, tell me if that's the case, because I will create a better lineup without Mike Scott in it, and I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Top of my head, that's the only Scott I can think of on the slate, and he was not on the board for me. You're talking about, with everything I said about all those other dice rolls, you were talking about the extreme version of that with Mike Scott here. We've got him. I won't let
anybody play Mike Scott. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Just block everybody from doing it. Yes. At minimum price, if you're going to do it, we've got him projected for 30 seconds of action. So,
jeez, I'm surprised if he even gets that. That would be amazing. All right. Also, Westbrook is a good anchor tonight. This is from Fargo Guy in the premium Slack. Awesemo Plus, you get this $29.95 a week. You have access to everything. And look, the premium basketball is up now, but I see all of the different channels from baseball to college football, golf, hockey. It's all there for you to get in and your questions answered on the strategy shows, the live before locks, especially as we lead you up to everything locking up in about 7 minutes. So Fargo Guy, Westbrook, a good anchor tonight, or should he be considering Beal/Simmons? And this is just for this Washington-Philadelphia game only.
Sorry. That was Beal and Simmons and what?
Yeah, and I guess it's something that, Westbrook as the anchor or running with Beal and Simmons in that lineup.
It would be Beal and Simmons for me based on how things were coming up in terms of the optimizer and what we were just getting more likely to be the overall optimal. You're just paying through the nose to get Westbrook in there. So I think you can do more with the Beal Simmons construction. And you can probably get more unique lineups, more different constructions. Westbrook is just going to force you down very specific lanes. Not to say he couldn't come out and be by far the best raw point scorer, because he's easily got that upside.
FanDuel GPP, Conley and Thibault, or Ja and Danny Green. This is from Bino Amadeo. And Thibault is always interesting, right? Because he's not going to score a lot of points, but if you can get points, DFS points, for what he does elsewhere, he's a sneaky play.
Yeah, and I like getting to guys like that, particularly when I'm looking for some of these offbeat value guys and guys who are, potentially going to be playing with other guys who are stars or who are just high usage kind of secondary players. He fits that mold where it's guys that can score in different ways, guys who can fill up a box score without actually scoring the basketball. So I think he's definitely interesting from that perspective. Gets almost no usage when he's out there. He's sitting like 9% usage, but he's got the ability to rack up a few rebounds, a few steals, and do his thing. So definitely would be in play from that perspective if you're looking for that kind of a value guy. That said, we've got him around 18 minutes, 0.77 fantasy points per minute. At 3,200 on DK, I like him a lot better than I do at 4,100 at the small forward on FanDuel.
Speaking of getting down a little bit there, your boy El Phenomeno there's a lot of things happening there, but it's your boy El wants to know FDGPP again, Neto or Bertans? Oof.
Oh boy, you're really scraping the bottom of the old barrel there.
There's got to be a third name.
Look for somebody better. But if I had to, I've just been burnt so many times this year by Bertans where Neto's paid off a few more times. I wish we were getting more reliable minutes out of Neto, but I think I'd rather take the Neto shares on. You're doing something different at the point guard position. You're going to somebody who's lower owned. Make sure that you're spending your money wisely in other spots. But I think we're squeezing a little bit more reliability, and we're definitely squeezing a little bit more in terms of the full season fantasy point per minute upside out of them. So I think that would be my preference.
Yeah, still some love there from Maxi as well. I see on the chat. You don't have anybody higher than, or do you have anybody higher than Tyson? Because Tyson, I feel like the magnitude of Tyson's cameo on The Hangover was not just how funny it was and how random it was and how just it was completely different than what you would expect even in this crazy movie, but it was still part, right, or really instrumental in his rise back up to kind of acceptance in our society. So it was kind of like dual, where it worked for him, but it also worked for us.
Yeah, for sure. It was a total surprise in that movie, and came out, and he came back around in the end of 2, and that's debatable. I don't really like the sequels to that movie, but the first one's a comedy classic. I mean, that thing was a juggernaut, and it vaulted him back into I don't know if respectability is the right word, but at least acceptance in the public eye. So just in thinking about it, going to a movie from a guy that you mentioned, I think it was before we got on the air, Adam Sandler made a movie called Mr. Deeds, and that's got a pretty solid John McEnroe cameo in it. So that was one that stood out to me. And then another one, it's debatable from 2 perspectives because I don't know that he counts as a sports star. He's certainly an athlete or an athletic guy, or he was. And then you could debate whether it's a cameo because he's probably in too much of the movie. But Andre the Giant and The Princess Bride was another guy who popped in there. I think it's too big a role, though. He's definitely an athlete, but I think the role is too big.
Yeah, we had that with OJ. Similar scenario. I think is Fezzik is his name, right? Or forget. Right. Yeah, too big of a role. It's like giving, Manu the 6th man. It's like, come on, dude. You came off the bench, but you played starter minutes and you were on the floor in the 4th quarter. Now, real quick, because I wanted to circle back on this. I'm the wrong guy to talk about this, Terry, because I am full on bias. But the last 5 or 6 messages on the chat were all Embiid bust. I'm fading Embiid. I get it. He's not a dominant fantasy point producer at times, although he can get significant usage out of a small amount of minutes. I could see him having 22 points and the Sixers win by 30 tonight. So I get the concern. Is there legit concern to maybe stay away entirely on a FanDuel lineup from him?
If I'm running 150, no way. I'm going to want him in a decent amount of those lineups. And that's how he's coming up in the optimizer. If I'm only building one, certainly there's justifiable reasons to go to one of the other centers on the board. And that's, again, how they were coming up. I said it was coming up a little bit more It was coming up a little bit of Joval in the next spot down. So it was 53% Embiid, and then it was Joval getting 25, Rudy getting 20. So I think I would probably lean toward Joval there, but I'm not looking at the ownership numbers. It might take too long to get to them. I'm just trying to find Joval on this ownership list, and he's not popping in front of me here. There he is. They're about the same. I think I would probably prefer Joval. He's a little bit under in terms of the ownership, and he's a little bit less expensive. So that's probably the one I would go to. That's probably also why he was coming up more in the optimizer. But I think Embiid would be by far my preference over there, just in terms of the fantasy points per minute, in terms of the guy who's most viable, most likely to put up a monster score. And even if he only plays 3.5 quarters, I think he can put up a runaway and hide number at the center position on FanDuel.
Awesome stuff, brother. I would leave you with this thought, not to be forgotten by any means, and up there maybe even at the time with Mike Tyson in The Hangover. Not that he needed this bounce back in our society by any means, but it's as far as memorable moment in one of the more memorable comedies of all time. Did we forget about Seabass? Did we forget about Kick His Ass, Seabass, Cam Neely, and Dumb and Dumber?
Cam Neely. I think that might be one that's kind of sneaky for a lot of people. A lot of people don't necessarily know, even probably at this point, who Cam Neely was. But even then, it wasn't like he was a giant star whose face you always saw or anything like that. That's a good sneaky one. I like that a lot. Kick his ass, Seabass.
Yeah, that was amazing. And then he comes back later, and they get the best of him.
Right. So good.
Awesome stuff. You and I are going to do this again tomorrow, 23 hours from now. So maybe we'll get back into like Bob Hoskins and Best Supporting Actors.
I love it. We can do that all day.
I know, that's the problem. Thanks to everybody. Leave a like, let the world know. Make sure you're subscribed. Hit the notification bell so you're not straggling in late. Thank Tyler as well for putting up with all of us and everything else that goes on these shows. Thank you all out there for having, spending some time with us tonight. Lineups are locked. You're all set to go. For Terry, for Tyler, I'm Eytan. Good luck, everybody.